I find the question why I am a Christian very difficult to answer, for it seems to me entwined with my very existence. I'm stood in front of a window in my house which has a daffodil on it. It's one of those things that I love, daffodils and sunflowers. They turn their head towards the sun. And that's what I feel that my life is all about, that I've just been kept on turning, kept my focus on the sun, which to me is obviously Jesus, the Son of God. My first understanding of what I knew to be God happened at a very young age. I remember leaving Sunday school when I was round about 4 years old, walking down the church path in Llandoch in South Wales, talking to God. And my grandmother stopped me and said, "Well, who are you talking to?" And in my brazen 4-year-old way, I said, "Why? God, of course." The very existence of God was in no doubt to me. And at that point, I knew that God existed. I had a very simple relationship with him, and it was truly a case of let the little children come to me. By the time I got to 11, it was the time to be confirmed. So I was in year 1 or year 7, as we call it now. And the time for confirmation came about. Now, confirmation in the Anglican Church is when you profess and own your own faith that was spoken for you at your baptism. And I was baptized as an infant when I was about 5 or 6 months old. I remember being quite excited about the confirmation classes because we'd be able to start to discuss the Bible and discuss faith. And I'd have some of those, kind of minor questions answered, questions like, the conflict between science and religion. And we'd be able to kind of sort it all out. I really enjoyed the discussions. I learnt a lot. But when the time came when the bishop laid his hands upon me at my confirmation, I felt a little bit of a letdown. I kind of thought there would be something a little bit more dramatic pre and post confirmation, at least some kind of tongues of flames, as happened in the Bible when the Holy Spirit came down upon the disciples. There didn't really seem to be much change. But I do remember other people being really pleased for me. And I also was called into the headmaster's study just to be congratulated. So my faith rolled on. By the time I was 18, I was more active within the church. I was a young leader at Sunday school. I was singing in the choir. And music has always been a big part of my life, singing in particular. And I do find that as a really good way to connect with God, to connect with him in worship, to communicate with him as the music and voices intertwine. I enjoy participatory worship where I get to sing in particular. And maybe this is why I feel a calling to participate more as a priest. For the Bible does teach us to worship the Lord with gladness and to come into his presence with singing. I went to university and there enjoyed my first year, which is a year when I occasionally went to church if I got up in time, but nothing really more. In the summer holidays, I remember thinking about my life at Liverpool University and thinking that somehow it just wasn't complete. There was music, both secular and sacred. There was fun, there were boys, there was my geography course. But something seemed to be missing, and that was church and an active spiritual life. For me, faith is not just something that one goes to or something that one just believes in. For me, it is something that you live out and participate in. So at that point, going back in my second year, I joined the Anglican chaplaincy at Liverpool and never really looked back. My friend Rhiannon describes it as not being pew fodder, which means you're not just sat there, you're doing something. So this led to an active involvement in every church that I've ever been to, teaching in the Sunday school. I've been a youth worker, and I did respond to a call to ordained ministry in my early 20s, but I was rejected. And so I was told to go and consider more about my calling to be a teacher. So I became a head of department, left Wales, met my husband and got married and pursued a career in teaching as well as motherhood. Throughout my married life and as a parent, I've continued to be actively involved within my own faith. And my faith has really sustained me during some dreadful times in my life, especially Richard's redundancies. He seems to have had quite a few through no fault of his own, but that worry about not having enough money, we kind of prayerfully considered it and just kind of left it in the hands of the Lord. The other difficult time was my mother's death in a car accident in Cardiff, and my faith really sustained me there. I can remember going to church and singing a worship song which had the word, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away." And it really did speak to me at that moment. And then we came and lived in Dimmock. And the priest there at the time, Tony, started talking about succession planning and how more people were needed to worship and lead services in church. And I prayed about this and I responded to the call, and I trained to be a reader. A reader in the Anglican Church is someone who is licensed within the church to preach, to lead services, to take funerals. Once I was licensed in the church, we went through a time of vacancy, which meant there was no priest there. So I was used a lot more than just my kind of 2 services a month. I began preparing children and parents for baptism. And this is really where my frustration came. As I explained the service, chose Bible readings with them, picked out hymns, prayed with them. But when the time came for the actual service, I had to hand the family over to the priest for the priest to baptize them. Talking with other readers, they didn't feel this sense of frustration. I also felt some element of frustration at the communion or Eucharist service, where I was preaching and leading up and during the service of the word part. But once it came to the consecration, it was like I was pushed aside and the priest came in to take over. It felt somehow wrong. So I started to feel that maybe this could be this call to ordained ministry again. So I prayed and I checked it out. And after a visiting priest talked to me after he'd seen me lead and preach at a service, he said, "You need to be ordained." During COVID, this was reinforced further when I presided at many funerals and even prayed with a lady at the end of her life. It was a most treasured moment. I talked and prayed with her, and to think that I was the last person that she heard before she met with Jesus face to face. So to cut a long story short, I'm here studying and praying with a diverse group of people, with Anglicans, with Methodists and Pentecostals at Queen's in Birmingham. I'm going to continue with my teaching career, but this time next year, God willing, I will be ordained, and you can, if you want to, call me Reverend Caroline. Thanks for listening.